Hey, so today we're going to be watching the Napoleonic Wars by OverSimplified, Part 1. As always, I'm going to be leaving a link to the original video and channel down in the description below, so go ahead and make sure that you check them out. Now, to the new viewers viewing this channel for the first time, a little background on myself. I was a former corporal in the United States Marine Corps, although I did get promoted like in the last 2 weeks, so they were kind of giving out promotions to anybody who had a heartbeat. I was an 0311 Marine who went on 2 deployments. First one, mainly staying in Kuwait over at Jabber. Second one, going back to Kuwait, spending some time in Jabber, about half the time's worth there, and then spending the other time really just in Syria, kind of standing post. Went on a little mission, nothing too crazy. Now, as far as for this video, I've always been kind of fascinated about just Napoleon all the way back since high school. Learned a little bit about him, didn't really know too much. I understood that he was supposed to be some kind of genius when it came to military tactics and just being a leader, essentially, right? And I haven't seen OverSimplified in quite a while. And then when all of a sudden this one popped up on my feed today, and I was like, you know what? Let's go ahead and give it a watch. Curious to see what kind of tactics he uses. What more is he all about? I understand he's considered short, although I would believe that he was not really short for the time. He was actually tall or something like that, and that people made fun of him. Great military tactician, from what I hear and remember. So, before we get into that video though, don't forget to like, subscribe, really does help me a lot. Hit that notification bell so you get notified every time I do upload. And without wasting too much more time, let's go ahead and get right into the video.
This video was made possible by NordVPN. Stay safe online by clicking the link below and get a huge discount off a 2-year plan with a risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. Also, why not grab yourself a character pin of the little corporal himself before they sell out? And big shout out to the patrons. Head on over to learn about benefits such as Discord access and maybe even a little behind-the-scenes content. Okay, Mrs. Bonaparte, this is it. One last push, and we're done. Congratulations, it's a general. Oh, and here comes the rest of the army now. Did you just say the rest of the army? History
And also, I just kind of miss his animation style. It's pretty funny.
is full of great conquerors, many with very impressive origin stories. For example, Alexander the Great was the son of a king. Julius Caesar came from an aristocratic family that descended from a goddess. Great conquerors don't usually come from relatively insignificant families living on impoverished islands. But as it just so happens, that is where our story begins. In the early 18th century,
So like a natural true underdog, right?
the island of Corsica was a part of the Republic of Genoa until one day Corsica said, "Hey, we're declaring independence, and it's probably not worth your time to try and stop us." So Genoa said, "You're right, it isn't worth their time. Hey France, you want to buy this island?" And France said, "Sure thing." And thus, Corsica became France, just in time for Napoleon to be born French. Many Corsicans didn't appreciate their new conquerors, however, and from an early age, Napoleon developed some fairly anti-French sentiments. Napoleon's dad, however, quickly embraced his new French overlords, which created some tension between dad and son. Ooh, look at me. I'm dad. I wear powdered wigs and silver-buckled shoes, and I'm a traitor to the Corsican people. Go to your room, Napoleon. No, you go to your room, dad. Okay. On the other hand,
Okay, wait. Why is it? Okay, so typically from what I remember, his animations look like this. Well, did he have a messed up nose, or like did he have something with his nose to make it that he actually drew it like this? I mean, frankly, I have a big nose too, but I don't know why he looks funny because he's in a little suit and he's supposed to be like a little kid.
Napoleon adored his mother, who was definitely the disciplinarian of the family. And even though she would punish Napoleon severely, he kind of respected that. But Napoleon's parents wanted the best for their family. And since they were of very minor nobility, they were able to have Napoleon sent off to the shining lights and rat-infested sewage puddles of the big city. Napoleon went to military school in France. Okay, Napoleon, why don't you introduce yourself to your new classmates? Well, I'm Napoleon, and I hate all of you. Your farts smell like cheese, you can't pronounce the letter R, all you do is go on strike, and you call eggs oofs like a bunch of big dumb idiot dingleberries. Okay. Thanks, Napoleon. I hope you like being bullied. And bullied he was. They picked on him for his Corsican accent, his family's lack of wealth, and it probably didn't help that he also had a bit of a chip on his shoulder. But he could hold his own, and on an average day, might be found dishing out ratatouille sandwiches for breakfast. He spent much of his time alone, and he loved reading about the great conquerors of history. He learned about Julius Caesar, and he wondered if one day he too might have a pizza franchise named after him. He excelled at math and geography, and when he graduated at the age of 16, he was made second lieutenant in an artillery regiment. Now,
way off topic. Isn't the CEO or the founder of Little Caesars, wasn't he a Marine? And as far as the part about him being bullied, I assumed it was going to happen either way, you know, considering the fact that you get someone who's, especially from back then, that you get somebody who's different, not only in terms of like possibly how they look physically, but also just accent, whatever language their native language is going to be. But that little speech that he was giving in front of the classroom, I don't know if he would have actually said that or did say that. If he did, probably didn't help with him trying not to get bullied. But he seemed like he could handle himself in a fight, or at least he was willing to fight. Whether or not he won those fights, who knows?
Now, second lieutenant might sound pretty sweet to a screw-up like you, but Napoleon had a little something called ambition. Stonks of it. And he wasn't content being just some junior officer. He wanted to rise the ranks. Unfortunately for him, that would be a little difficult. Well, Napoleon, I've reviewed your application. It's clear you're very skilled and would be a perfect fit for the promotion. And Simeon, you're just about the biggest idiot I've ever seen. Your test results suggest you have the mental aptitude of a senile earthworm, and in the part of the form where you list your experience, you seem to have drawn a picture of a gerbil giving birth to a shoe. But your dad is the Marquis de la Fufayette, so you get the job. French society was just too closed off. Positions were handed out based on nobility, not talent, and the young Napoleon probably felt...
Okay, so I understand that this type of concept is going on a lot back in the day, right? Like, if you knew someone of a family who was, like, either wealthy, and I'm not just saying it was wealthy people, but just you knew someone, right? And you would rather give it to them instead of someone who's qualified. For example, if I started a business, more likely than not, I wouldn't hire maybe personal friends, right? I mean, just because, like, business and friends feels like it wouldn't work out. But I feel like you would want to hire... I mean, if you're being smart about it, you're going to hire the people who are going to be able to do whatever the job it is. Otherwise, you may be setting yourself up for failure, or if not failure, you're going to be giving yourself a headache for no real good reason. Other than, I mean, unless it's like in this scenario where they're trying to get maybe some benefits or perks from like another family, another company. You know, I mean, but, I don't know.
Felt stuck. Wouldn't it be nice if, say, a revolution came along and changed all of that? Well, what are the chances? The French Revolution is here. Bastille toppling, head chopping, king popping. The revolution promised to do away with the old social hierarchy and make everyone a little more equal. Napoleon may not have cared much for the violent mobs, but if it meant he could rise the ranks, he was in. He began fighting to defend the revolution. He put down a British-sponsored counter-revolution in Toulon and got promoted. He put down a royalist uprising in Paris and got promoted. And as his military prowess became more recognized, he was even given his very own army. It was astonishing progress for such a young man of humble origins, and Napoleon's wildest dreams were coming true. But Napoleon also believed he could increase his social status if he married an older rich lady. And so around this time, Napoleon went on the prowl. However, if some sources are to be believed, he was a verified creep. He reportedly had terrible luck with women, and most wanted nothing to do with him. Fortunately, he eventually met Joseph.
Right, so they said he was incredibly thin, which, you know, considering back then they were going through revolution or things are going on where necessarily good food isn't necessarily available, but I would assume since he had his own little army. I don't know how big that army was supposed to be. My history is a bit shoddy these days. You would assume he would get some kind of better food, right? I mean, to an extent. And as he's going up, kind of like getting promoted through merit and skill, eventually he just maybe realized, especially for that time and age, I got to kind of do something to elevate, like how he said, his social status, right? To be able to actually be able to do what he wants to do. Or maybe at some point he felt lonely and kind of wanted to get married.
An aging single mother who was deeply in debt and needed stability, so she agreed to marry him despite finding him intensely disgusting. Napoleon, you dirty dog, you've done it. Unbeknownst to Napoleon, however, Josephine had a bit of a promiscuous reputation. Hey Napoleon, I hear you're marrying Josephine. Boy, she sure is a great kisser. That's right. Hey, wait, what do you mean she's a great kisser? Hey Hugo, you hear Napoleon's marrying Josephine? Wow, she sure is a great kisser. Now hang on just a minute. Hey everyone, Napoleon's marrying Josephine. Oh yeah, she sure is a great kisser. She's real good at kissing. Wow. I'm pretty sure I kissed her just yesterday. Goodness sake, is there anyone here who hasn't kissed my wife? Yeah, you. As Napoleon...
As soon as he said that, I saw that coming. But I do wonder, though, if they actually said a lot of this stuff to his face, or was it more of like behind closed doors type deal where they would whisper to each other when he would be around and he would kind of overhear, or people would tell him like, hey, so-and-so is talking smack about you type deal. I don't know, but it doesn't seem wise to be able to do that to someone who has an army, right?
Napoleon fell madly in love with his new wife. She fell madly in love with a man named Hippolyte. It wouldn't be long, however, before Napoleon would leave home and go to war, because while France was having its revolution, tensions in Europe were rising. Hey Austria, you'll never guess what we just did. What's that, France? I got 2 words for you. Revolution. We totally just socked it to our monarchy. What? Dude, the rest of us are monarchies. You've just totally threatened the balance of power in Europe. Now we have to worry about our stinky peasants rising up against us. I mean, holy hell, your queen is... Okay, France, this is pretty awkward. And the rest of Europe is probably itching to give you a wedgie. But you're not ready for a war yet. So you gotta be cool, man. It's absolutely crucial that you say something to defuse the situation right now. Preposterous! I declare war. Sacre bleu! So France ended up at war with basically the rest of Europe, and the War of the First Coalition began. At first, France struggled, but then they started to do surprisingly well, and in many conquered territories, they began to establish sister republics, exporting their revolutionary ideas across Europe. In 1796, they planned a 3-pronged attack to take Vienna and knock Austria out of the war, with 2 magnificent armies in the north to kick ass, and Napoleon in the south as a bit of a diversion. For the first time, Napoleon would lead a military campaign. This was his chance to prove himself, to be somebody. And what a general he proved to be. The army he was given were demoralized.
I didn't know that they were actually fighting people on all sides, really, for the most part, or from what the picture showed. And it seems like so far France is kind of right now on a good head start. And I just kind of want to see what Napoleon does to try to turn this around.
Lacking equipment, and underpaid. But Napoleon galvanized them with inspirational speeches, and he took them into Italy. He was outnumbered, and his campaign was partially meant to be a sideshow, but he made it the main show. While the 2 northern armies were being held back, Napoleon made staggering progress. In a signature Napoleon move, he masterfully split his enemies into 2 and took them on separately, knocking Sardinia out of the war and putting the Austrians on the run. At the famous Battle of Lodi, he was in the fray, aiming the cannons himself, getting covered in mud, and earning the total respect of his men. They respected him so much that when he ordered an almost suicidal assault on the only bridge in town, his men threw themselves at it and took it despite fierce Austrian resistance. For Napoleon, it was all he needed to confirm that he was the greatest human who had ever existed. Wow, Napoleon, you're pretty great at this military stuff.
Okay, I mean, leading by example. He's right in the fight with his boys. Could be very risky since he is kind of the figurehead right here. If he gets taken out, whole army could fall apart just because of that. But then again, you typically have someone who's going to take charge, and there's always going to be someone who takes charge. And if the person freezes or doesn't know what to do or just panics, goes into shock, it could literally be anybody who just stands up and says that they're going to take charge. And for the most part, I feel like people would, say, all right, what are we going to do? So as far as this tactics, the way it kind of seemed where you had the 2 right here, his opposing force, I believe they had like 4 flags. It seemed like they would have 1 flag kind of be in the defense, right? I mean, he didn't go too far into detail. He just said that they would separate them and then kind of close in again on the other one. So it seems like they would take, so you have the 4, you got 1 kind of holding the defense, it seems, against the one on the right. I forgot the flag. But then you use the other 3 to overpower the ones that were on the left, right? By encircling them. And then once you got that, reconsolidate forces, and then I guess you could have them keeping an eye on the flag that stayed still on the right side, kind of being in defense, if that is what happened, and then have the other ones go around and they come in, right? If that is how it happened.
Just be careful your head doesn't get too big. What did you just say to me, you little prick? And as Napoleon swept through northern Italy, the Italians cheered his arrival. Yes, I'm here to liberate you from your cruel Austrian oppressors. And replace them with French ones. Napoleon plundered as he went, sending riches back to France to help its economy, but also paying his men the first real money they'd seen in years. The Pope had been supporting the Austrians, so Napoleon briefly went to go give him a slap, and as he began to approach Vienna, the exhausted Austrians were forced to make peace, with Napoleon overseeing negotiations himself. He had just single-handedly knocked Austria out of the war. And by the way, he was only 28, so maybe it's about time you moved out of your dad's attic. In the Italian territories he had conquered, Napoleon established new French sister republics, even writing constitutions and organizing governments himself, not something a general generally does. When he got back to France, he was hailed as a hero, and the extremely unpopular government were concerned he might get some power-hungry ideas, so they agreed he should go far away from France to Egypt, where he could maybe undermine British access to India. Napoleon was eager to win more glory, so he brought with him a team of scholars, and he was like, whoa, it's a freaky man-cat. Whoa, it's a big...
It's a big stick. We all know what he means. But as far as the part where the government there wasn't liking it, he was kind of getting all this attention, all this popularity. Why would they care? I mean, unless, yes, I can see the fact that considering with all that popularity, that he could overthrow the government, right? You know, I mean, but at this point, I don't think there was any really cause. I mean, unless there's some underlying things that I don't know about, could be very possible, that would cause him to try to take over the government and then make himself as the ruler of France at the time. And for the most part, as far as sending money back, the government's still getting money, I would think, right? At least in that scenario. And for the most part, France is actually doing pretty good, right? As far as making more money and really showing people around them, like, hey, mess with us, see what's going to happen, type deal. F around and find out. And also do feel like this whole thing about someone gaining a certain amount of popularity and then the government decides to try to take them out. I feel like I've definitely seen it happen in a lot more other areas of history.
Stick. Whoa, it's an ugly horse. Whoa, it's a stumpy little manlet. Hey, I'm actually average height for the time. But then British Admiral Nelson came down and wrecked his fleet, and an Anglo-Ottoman force defeated him at Acre, so Napoleon abandoned his men and went back to France. His campaign in Egypt hadn't gone quite as planned, but one thing you should know about Napoleon...
Wait, was it because of his, it was a different environment? As far as him fighting, I mean, I would assume more in Europe, obviously, right? They're going to be fighting more forested regions. For example, myself being in 3-7 over at 29 Palms, I'll be fighting more in a desert environment. Also, I deployed to the Middle East, right? So, desert. Now, if you take people who are from, say, Horno over in Camp Pendleton, they're going to be more suited for, jungle environments, right? Marines who are going, to South Korea, or basically just being in more of a jungle aspect, right? And then if you flip-flopped, sure, they could still do the job, possibly, right? Or at least for the most part, but it's definitely going to be a lot different, right? And things can get messed up on the way, and you could just be, I mean, and it seems like kind of that's what happened here, right? There's probably could have been a different type of terrain style, and then the ones who were already there already kind of knew what to expect, and he was kind of maybe having to wing it, and then just things didn't turn out the way he probably would have wanted them to.
Napoleon was that he was a skilled propagandist. He published his own newspapers that sometimes exaggerated his achievements, and even commissioned paintings that generally made him look cool. So when he returned to Paris, he was yet again hailed as a hero, and he began to get some power-hungry ideas. First, however, he had a bit of a problem to deal with. See, he had learned something shocking about his dear wife. Really, Josephine? This guy? I'm just as tall as him. I'm sorry, I swear. Now that you're becoming famous, I'll never do it again.
So it seems like the height thing had some merit to it. I mean, he's the average height for the time, it seems like. I think it was because he would try to make himself seem taller in his pictures than from what him being a propagandist, spreading propaganda, right? As far as how he looked.
Make sure you don't. I've never stooped so low as to cheat on you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be in this room consulting my generals for the next 30 minutes. And by consulting, I mean boinking. By my generals, I mean this woman. And by 30 minutes, I mean 2 seconds. Having dealt with his wife, Napoleon was then approached by a very influential politician who said he had an idea. He wanted to stage a coup against the deeply unpopular government and needed the extremely popular Napoleon's help. And Napoleon thought that was just the darn tootinest idea. The plan was to trap the government and convince them to voluntarily give up their power. And here's how they did it. Hey guys, oh my gosh, quick! There's a dangerous Jacobin plot to overthrow you, which we definitely aren't just making up. Better get inside this cage so we can protect you. Okay. Gentlemen, we got him. In this case,
there's no way. There's no way that happened. How? I mean, unless it was very slick. How would you be able to convince them to literally go in the... Obviously, I don't know if he's using a metaphor, but if they literally talked them into going into a cage, they deserve what happened to them. Because how do you fall for that?
The cage was an isolated palace outside of Paris, with no one around but Napoleon and his army. With the government inside, Napoleon then entered, and a pretty chaotic event ensued, during which the government didn't seem entirely sure what was going on, Napoleon's men didn't seem entirely sure what was going on, and Napoleon himself didn't seem entirely sure what was going on. But thankfully, Napoleon's brother Lucien, president of the lower house, managed to regain control, and the remaining councilmen were intimidated into creating a new constitution. And thus, a new government was formed, this time with 3 consuls in charge. But after Napoleon did some rewriting, in the end, there was really only one man in charge, the first consul, him. And over the next few years, he worked to consolidate even more power, and essentially became a dictator in total control of France. And by the way, he was only 30, so maybe it's about time you washed your disgusting bedsheets. France was now ruled by...
I don't like the way this guy's talking mad trash. But, okay, 30, he's leading France. He is the leader of France at this point.
By possibly the greatest military leader of the time. Possibly the greatest? Or definitely? Well, now is his chance to prove it. See, back when Napoleon was still in Egypt, being Indiana Jones. Back home, France was in France, being France. They had conquered even more territory, and they were like, hey Piedmont, you get revolutionary ideals. Hey Switzerland, you get revolutionary ideals. And Rome, you get revolutionary ideals. Everybody gets revolutionary Oh, hey guys, nice sledgehammers. And Naples, very cool nail gun. You guys here to get some revolutionary ideas? As France was still spreading the revolution, and with Napoleon busy in Egypt, the European powers felt the time was right for round 2, and the War of the Second Coalition began. And this time, their big bad boy buddy Russia was here to bang some French boys back to Bordeaux. And bang them, they did. France got blasted. But then Russia pulled out after stalling in Switzerland, and now that Napoleon was in charge of the country, he was ready to start blasting right back. He took command of the Army of the Reserve, and he brought the fight to the Austrians. Now, there are many traits that made Napoleon a great military leader. I already mentioned one of them, how he was one of the boys and commanded the total loyalty of his men. But now we see a second reason.
Honestly, man, you'd be surprised about how far that actually goes. As far as with the, especially in the Marine Corps from my own experience, right? If you really have like a chain of command that can go out of their way to really genuinely try to help you, because they really do care about you, right? The ones that do, I'm not saying they all do, because a lot of them surely don't. But if you get those that do, you get a lot more people who are willing to do things when, whenever you're in a leadership position and you tell them to do something, and they'll just kind of do it, right? There's not going to be a whole lot of resistance, and they just say, well, why are we doing this and that, and then all of a sudden it slows things down, right? But if throughout time, you showed them that, hey, you're willing to get your hands dirty, kind of exactly what they've been through because you've been through it yourself, that loyalty or those bonds, right, that you start to create when you're in the fleet becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And then that's the kind of the moment, those rare instances where everything just kind of flows right. Everyone's on the same page.
The element of surprise. In 1800, Napoleon moved to Geneva, and it looked like he was probably going to take on the Austrian forces in Germany. There's no way he'd be crazy enough to move his entire army south through the Alps as a surprise attack on the Austrians besieging Genoa. Oh, Napoleon's moving his entire army south through the Alps as a surprise attack on the Austrians besieging Genoa. Napoleon's crossing of the Alps is legendary, and you may have seen one of the most famous paintings of the general, popping a sick wheelie on his majestic stallion surrounded by dangerous mountain terrain. Of course, in real life, he made the crossing on a depressed mule. But that's not as cool. When he emerged in Italy, the Austrians expected him to come break their siege, but Napoleon went for their supply line near Milan, forcing the Austrians to meet Napoleon head-on at the famous Battle of Marengo. The Austrians initially clobbered the outnumbered French, and they were like, hooray! We won. But then a few hours later, Napoleon showed up again with an even bigger army, and he clobbered them right back. Holy cow, this tiny little fun-sized French guy is running rings around us.
Hey! I'm average height for the time, you jerk!
Then, after General
First of all, when he went through those mountains, it was a big part of the thing. It reminded me of what one of my super seniors told me in the Marine Corps, as far as him being, you choose the hardest terrain to go through because, for example, if you're in the Middle East, right, roads are going to be laid in with IEDs for the most part, right, or you got pressure plates or whatever is there, because obviously you're going to have vehicles going through there, right? Because if you try to go on the sides and if you run into a lot of soft sand, vehicles are going to get stuck. So for the most part, you're kind of stuck going on the road. But if you're in a patrol, more likely than not, you're going to be taking a difficult route, a route that most people wouldn't take. And then once you would come back, oh my God, that car sounded loud. Kind of scared me. When you're on, don't rev the engine while I'm talking to you. But while you're coming back, just go. What are you waiting for? But when you are coming back from whatever objective or mission you were supposed to do, you're going to take an even different route. That's also be difficult because more likely than not, less people go through it, less chances of there being IDs. And for the most part, people aren't going to expect it.
Moreau's victory at Hohenlinden, Vienna was exposed, and the Austrians again sued for peace. Just like the War of the First Coalition, the Second Coalition ended in another French victory. But in many ways, they both felt more like Napoleon victories. Only the UK remained at war with Napoleon, and they were using their powerful navy to blockade French ports and were even seizing the cargoes of neutral ships. Obviously, everyone else got pretty pissed off that the British were interfering with their trade, so in response, they formed a league, and they embargoed the UK right back. Neutral countries protecting their own interests? That's offensive. So Britain went to Copenhagen and blew a bunch of stuff up, and the league disbanded. But because the UK's economy was pretty bust, they decided to sign a treaty with France in 1802.
Wait, doesn't it seem crazy that back in the day they would, hey, if you got an issue with me, we're gonna go mess you up. But now the fact that you got so many countries that have alliances or like they're friendly to one another, that if you were to attack one, more likely than not you're gonna be starting a war or at least an international crisis, right, with a whole bunch of other different countries. And it's crazy to think that back then they just blew up the ships in Copenhagen, right? Kind of messed things up.
For the first time in a long time, Europe was at peace. Congratulations, sire. You've achieved peace. Yes, Pierre, but not for long. I still don't trust those dirty Brits. Did you hear they've been calling me the Bony Man? What does that even mean? Keep an eye on them, would you? I can't, sire. Why not? Because they use NordVPN. How would you like to spend 12 hours a day on your favorite website ever without the fear of your data being stolen? Then you need NordVPN. NordVPN has thousands of secure servers. Oh yeah. Crossing the Alps, defeating the Austrians, and Europe at peace. What a meteoric rise it had been for the young Corsican. He had just taken charge of a nation that appeared to be losing a war and turned it all around, securing French gains in Europe. But there was now a big question. You see, throughout the chaotic French Revolution, French governments had struggled to keep the economy afloat. They often didn't have a whole lot of support, and they frequently came and went. Would Napoleon finally be the man who could stick around? Military victories were one thing, but could the general also govern? Spoiler alert. Yes. The economy's crumbling? Well then why don't you have yourself a new national bank, currency reform, and improved taxation and welfare systems? The legal system is an incoherent mess? Well then why don't we nicely wrap all those civil laws up into one new centralized legal code? Corrupt government officials? Throw them in the trash. Bad infrastructure? Throw it in the trash. Women's rights? Throw them in the trash. Wait, really? Well, yeah, unfortunately, while Napoleon was building on the equality of the revolution, he also largely scaled back rights for certain groups, and husbands had full legal control over their wives. But come on, ladies, maybe let men have a slice of the pie for...
Wait, so this is how he actually looked? Or maybe it's close to what he really did. Like, I didn't know he was actually taking back things from women at this time. I thought he probably would just, because, back then. I thought he probably would have increased things for men. I didn't know he was actually taking it away. So that was interesting. Didn't expect that.
For once. Okay. Napoleon further reformed education, ensuring a system based on individual ability, meaning now Simeon had to compete with everyone else, and Napoleon could get the cream of the crop to help him run the Republic. But he wasn't just building on the ideas of the revolution. The revolution had led to a lot of chaos, and Napoleon needed stability. So he rolled back. Although
the part about connections, about like everyone, or it being based on the individual, right? I feel like that's pretty good. It seems good, right? As far as like you're going to be based on what you can do, your merit, just can you do something? Or if you're good for a job, you're going to get it regardless of whatever, background you have. It doesn't matter if you came from a rich or poor family. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter anything, so long as you could do it, right? Because it helps you make a living, but it also helps whoever you would be working for or start working with.
A couple things, most notably with religion. The revolution had pretty much kicked the Catholic Church to the curb, but Napoleon understood that since many French citizens still considered themselves Catholic, that could be a problem. So he came to an agreement with the Pope and brought back the Church, only this time with some pretty hefty power limitations. He also ensured freedom for other religions, and is often noted for his positive treatment of Jewish people at a time of widespread anti-Semitism. But while all of this may make Napoleon sound like a pretty stand-up dude, it's good to note that he believed in religious freedom because he thought it was a powerful tool to keep the poor from eating the rich. Or something like that. Overall, Napoleon's aim was to end the chaos of the revolution and finally create a stable and prospering French republic. And in that aim, he seemed to be largely successful and generally popular with the people of France. He officially declared that the revolution is over, adding, "I am the revolution." Napoleon's head could be seen for miles. Of course, not everyone was happy with Napoleon's reforms. Conservatives felt he was too radical. Radicals felt he was too conservative. But since Napoleon was a dictator, opposition could usually be stamped out with some good old-fashioned iron fisting. In 1804, Napoleon took one last major step. After some failed attempts were made to assassinate him, he wanted to strengthen his position and ensure his dynasty could live on after him. And so he decided being first consul for life simply wasn't quite enough. He decided he should become emperor. He held a vote, asking the French people if they were cool with the idea, and they returned a definitely not rigged 99.9% in favor. The ball's on this man. And so on the 2nd of December, 1804, in an elaborate ceremony at Notre Dame,
What would it matter, though, what you would call it? I mean, if you're the leader, it doesn't really matter what the title is, I guess. I mean, unless but it also would depend on like how you would lead, right? If you were going to lead from more dictatorship, presented more of this democracy, but then again, he wouldn't be it for life. And it seems like kind of that's what he wants to do. And as far as him sending out that, I guess, poll, right, to kind of see if people would be okay with it or not, if it was rigged, which obviously he said, could have, maybe not, probably was, I think that would be just enough to satisfy yourself. I don't think people are actually going to believe that, right, for the most part, in my opinion. And it's just going to probably make a lot of people pissed off. But then again, it's just the title. He kind of really, at this point, seems like he's the one who is leading France.
Napoleon was made emperor. The Pope was even invited to attend, and normally he would crown an emperor. But to make sure everyone knew this wasn't some Charlemagne-style circular power division, Napoleon lifted the crown and placed it on his own head. Like I said, the ball's on this man. He was now emperor of the French. Well, Napoleon, you were a general, then you became first consul for life, and now you're an emperor. Is it enough yet? Is your ambition finally satisfied? I don't know, Pierre. What comes after emperor? I would say God, sire. You want to be a god? Yes. I'll put it down under maybe. Okay, everyone. What the hell is going on? This Corsican guy showed up out of nowhere, and he's kicking our ass. He's exporting the ideas of the French Revolution wherever he goes, and he just declared himself King of Italy and Emperor. He can't do that. I'm the Emperor. Oh, hey fellow monarchs. I see you're having a monarch party. My invite must have got lost in the mail. I'll just set up a spot right here. Wow. You don't belong here, Napoleon. We're coming to take you down. I'd like to see you try. Whoa, I'm so scared I just pooed my pants. Hey everyone, I just pooed my pants. No, but I did just poo my pants. Before Napoleon had even declared himself emperor, the British had already redeclared war on France because both sides had been violating their previous treaty. Napoleon immediately occupied Hanover and then began making plans for a great British invasion, partially paid for by selling a huge chunk of land to the United States. Napoleon gathered his army along the English Channel, but here was the problem. While Napoleon's powerful army would almost certainly obliterate the British on land, there was very little chance he'd actually make it across the Channel, because Britannia ruled the waves. This power dynamic would keep the two traditional enemies from engaging in much real direct combat throughout the Napoleonic Wars. However, the British had something else up their sleeve. copious amounts of money. They were willing to throw cash at anyone who would go to war against Napoleon, and there were plenty of takers. Austria, Russia, Naples, and Sweden, hoping to put Napoleon's France back in its place, formed the...
So it's not even that Great Britain was actually actively fighting them. It was more that they were just paying everybody else to do it for them.
The third coalition against France. The coalition forces probably thought that this time they stood a chance. They weren't prepared for the total humiliation they were about to suffer. The War of the Third Coalition was Napoleon at his best. We've already learned 2 ways in which Napoleon was a great military commander, but here comes one of the biggest reasons: speed. He had reorganized his army into corps, which were themselves basically small armies. Each had their own infantry, cavalry, and artillery, and as a result, was able to act more independently. They spread out through the countryside, and by living off the land, rather than relying on heavy supply trains, they were able to move.
I don't know why that was so funny. They were like bouncing around. Okay, so I don't know how the military tactics from back then, but from what I always seem to have read about or always heard about is that they were moving people en masse, right? And they would do like that whole shoot, run around everybody else, reload in the meantime while everyone else is shooting online, right? Now, as far as them being separated into smaller ones, so it seems like at first it's probably like a unit size, right? As far as like having your 3 companies or your 3 land companies and then having a weapons company. And then also, you know, there's headquarters company as well. But then instead of moving with everybody always at once, which obviously would take a lot more time, it seems now that he's moving them within companies, right? Kind of like how he's describing it right here. Because from what he's saying, he's just saying that he's breaking down his forces into smaller ones. And I'm not really getting like kind of what the size is, right? I'm going to assume company size. It seems like it would make the most sense, which is what in turn helps them like to be able to have that speed. Which, by the way, if you've been in the Marine Corps, you probably know this from ITX, right? That last 220 range, I think it was, that big mountain town at the end of ITX, and it's insane, trust me.
Extremely quickly, Napoleon would traverse massive distances, outmaneuver his enemies, isolate them, and then move in for the kill before they even knew what was going on. Lightning warfare leading to total destruction. Would you like to see him do it? Here we go. Part of the coalition's plan was for the Russians to meet up with the Austrians and take on Napoleon together. Combined, they could turn the tide against him, so Napoleon needed to stop them from ever meeting. But he's all the way over in Boulogne. No problem. In a matter of weeks, Napoleon marched 200,000 men, in secret, encircling Austrian General Mack and capturing his entire army. A devastating blow. Napoleon later remarked, "I have destroyed the Austrian army by simply marching." Next, he turned to face the approaching Russians. Okay, it looks like the French are coming for us, but check this out. I've got an amazing idea. When they approach, we run away. Sir? You're a genius. The Russians began to retreat with Napoleon giving chase, and since his tactics relied on quick victories, this could be a problem, especially because the longer the war went on, the more likely it looked other countries may join the coalition against him. But Napoleon knew the Russian Tsar, Alexander I, was young and seeking glory, so he...
There's also the part about not over chasing or not over pursuing your enemy, because if you are more likely than not, it's going to be a trap.
Came up with an idea to lure him in. He sent him a message. What does it say? It says, "Hello, I'm just a little baby boy, and I'm very scared." Are you talking like that, or is he? He is, sir. Why is he doing that? I don't know, but it's very cute, helpless, and vulnerable. A little baby boy, eh? Very scared, eh? Cute, eh? Boris, get my crossbow. We're going hunting. The Allied forces turned to face Napoleon, who they now believed was in a vulnerable position. He was set up at Austerlitz, and to make it look like he was retreating, he had even evacuated the high ground. A thick fog set in, obscuring Napoleon's center, as the Allies took the bait and set up on the heights. From there, they spotted Napoleon's very weak-looking right flank, and they descended the heights to go get it. Little did they know, it was exactly what Napoleon was hoping they'd do. The next thing they knew, a large French force was emerging from the fog, launching a huge central assault up the hill. They swung around, crushing the Allies, and as men attempted to flee across the frozen lakes, Napoleon ordered his artillery to fire on the ice, causing an unknown number to drown. But he told me he was just...
Okay, wait, so the fact he's able to coordinate all of this going on when communication back then would have been very difficult, right? Especially over long distances. You don't have any radios, you don't have comms. Maybe that's, I mean, I think it was, they would use drums. Although I don't think at this time to kind of like signal what kind of formation or what they're going to do, or signals, hand and arm signals, right? And then they would also have maybe flags, I think it was, to signify something. But the fact that he could do this, he had to do quite a bit of extensive planning to ensure that all this kind of went off without a hitch. And if some things happened that caused certain parts of the plan not to really go through, it kind of seems like it probably have contingency plans, but it doesn't seem that that's what happened. So, but just, dude, the fact that he got all this to actually go the way he envisioned it, or just the way he thought it was going to go, it's crazy.
Just a little baby boy. What happened? He tricked you, sir. You mean I was the little baby boy all along? It was Napoleon's masterpiece, and Austria were once again forced to make peace with France. Then, with the French conquest of Naples in 1806, the War of the Third Coalition ended as yet another Napoleon victory. This was the third time Napoleon had had to give Austrian Emperor Francis a good spanking. And so, with the peace treaty in 1805, Napoleon was determined to punish him. He was forced to give up territory, hand over significant compensation, and promised never to fight Napoleon again. For now, Russia...
Wait, was that Dogecoin? But also I was going to say, if Australia has done that now for the second time, was it the second time or third time? They've done it more than once. It'd be more than likely, from what he just said, that he's going to punish them, right?
Sweden and the UK remained at war with France, but none were able to offer much of a threat. And so, Napoleon got to work strengthening his grip over Europe. He gave out rule of captured territories to his family and friends, and most notably, he established a new confederation in Germany, with himself as its protector. Seeing his influence in Germany being wiped away, Emperor Francis acknowledged reality and officially dissolved the Holy Roman Empire, an entity that had existed for over 1,000 years. But it wasn't all good news for Napoleon. For one thing, Spain had earlier allied with France in 1804 because the British just couldn't help themselves from blowing up Spanish ships, and Napoleon hoped a combined French-Spanish fleet would eventually be able to invade England. Unfortunately, he received word that British Admiral Nelson had engaged his fleet at Trafalgar. Normally, naval battles looked like this, but in this case, Nelson did this. Was it because he was an idiot? No. It's because he was a genius. He successfully punched through the Franco-Spanish line and unleashed hell. His victory ensured British control of the sea, and his death...
But the way things were going, wouldn't that also hit his own guys, or at the very least have the possibility of hitting his own guys, right? A lot of blue on blue. And, well, I mean, then again, you know, if they can get close enough to where those cannons on the enemy, or in this case Spain's, cannot actually engage them, right? And they can go through center. It also involves possibility of them getting rammed into, though, you know. But then again, Spain wouldn't be able to fire on them, as far as I know, right? I feel like it's very risky, but it seems like it worked out for Great Britain at the time.
During the battle, made him a legend. Napoleon's hopes for a future British invasion were gone. But not just that. Napoleon was also hoping to secure peace on the continent, but that wasn't looking likely because the Prussian king was under pressure from his wife. Frederick, he's established a confederation in our turf, and he told us he'd give us Hanover, but then offered it to the British. You have to declare war on him. What is it with you and war? What is it with you and being a cupcake? Go to war! Okay. In October 1806, Prussia, with its famed military tradition, joined the coalition and declared war, beginning the War of the Fourth Coalition. Unfortunately, Prussian King Frederick William III wasn't the smartest tool in the shed. Look at him over there, being all French. Makes me sick. Boys, we'll get him this time. But here's the thing. This time, we have to stick together. Do not under any circumstances face Napoleon by yourself. You all saw what happened to Austria... hey, where'd Fred go? Hey, you jerk. Think you're some kind of big shot? Huh? Wanna tango with Fred? You don't got the cojones. We're screwed. Without consulting its allies, Prussia had gone ahead and sent Napoleon an ultimatum, demanding he move all his forces out of Germany. Now, some of you watching this video probably can't even wipe your own bum yet, but even you know, you don't just send Napoleon an ultimatum. Obviously, Napoleon went in for the kill. Prussia's army was quite outdated, so when they met Napoleon at the twin battles of Jena and Auerstedt, it wasn't even close. Even Marshal Davout's heavily outnumbered corps at Auerstedt sent the Prussians running, and Napoleon carried out a ruthless pursuit of his fleeing enemy, taking Berlin and within a single month decimating the Prussian forces. Frederick William and the remnants of his army moved to the east. At this point, Napoleon's forces were pretty tired. Winter had come, and conditions were miserable. He anticipated both sides would settle into winter quarters, but Russia decided to try their hand at an unexpected winter attack. A series of brutal battles followed that took a heavy toll on both sides, including the vicious Battle of Eylau, fought in blizzard conditions. Men froze to death, and many deserted. The Russian artillery tore the French to shreds, and Napoleon himself was momentarily under risk of being captured. In the end, the French army was saved thanks to a legendary cavalry charge by Napoleon's flamboyant cavalry commander, Murat. After the horror...
I just want to say, if you have gone to Alaska for training, if you've gone to... I heard South Korea gets cold too, right? If you go to there during the winter. Or if you've been to Bridgeport, which some of my junior Marines had gone to after I had gone out of the Marine Corps. Being able to fight in snow, I've never had to experience it or even have to train in that type of environment. It just sounds miserable. If you've been to Bridgeport while it was snowing, or if you've been to training in Alaska or any type of snow training, let me know down in the comments how that went. I could only imagine how horrible it is.
Horror inflicted on both sides, they decided it might be a good idea not to do any more fighting until after winter. Then, after winter came, and the fighting continued. The Russians were pushed back to Friedland, where Russian General Bennigsen made a bit of a blunder by positioning himself with the Aller River to his back. The French artillery were able to pin the Russians between the river and their concentrated gunfire, a major element in Napoleon's fighting style, and many Russians drowned as they tried to escape. War of the Fourth Coalition. Victory, Napoleon.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about that for a minute. I didn't remember too much about Napoleon back in my, ever since history class in high school, right? And obviously, I mentioned it during the video at the beginning. I didn't know this guy was this much of a beast, or as far as being able to really be able to accomplish all this. And he's literally the guy who started from the bottom, now we're here type deal, right? Now, since there's a part 2 to this, I want to see how far it's gonna go, right? I mean, I haven't heard anything about Waterloo. I remember Waterloo being associated with Napoleon. And I think it was that he suffers a defeat there, although I'm not too sure, and I'm not going to research into it too much because I want to see that in the part 2 one. And one more quick thing, it really did surprise me kind of that it wasn't, or the quote was it divide and conquer, right? As far as, I don't remember it being heard or said in the video, but they may say it in part 2, but in any case, it kind of seems to be a strategy, and I'm assuming that because of this strategy, a lot of other countries are eventually going to be able to use this to their own advantage. If you already know how your enemy is going to act, then prepare for it, right? But other than that, I don't really have too much else to say. So that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe. It really does help me a lot. Hit that dislike button if you didn't like it. Leave me a little comments to maybe what it was. It really does help me for the channel. Go ahead and check my second channel, which I'm going to be linking to down below. I play some games over there. Right now, I'm working on some more gameplay, doing some editing. And it's going to pretty much revolve whatever games I'm feeling at the time. I'm going to try to get back into a little more scary horror type games because it is almost Halloween. But until then, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.